All right, so we're now going to start talking about graphing quadratic equations, quadratic functions. We've already kind of looked on a graph and we were able to find the pieces. Now we want to go the other direction. They're not going to give you a graph, they're going to give you an equation. You have to use that equation to find the pieces and then graph it. Okay, so an important thing is which way does that parabola open? Does it open up? Does it open down? And you're going to find that a lot of the same things still apply. So the parabola opens. Again, it's the a value. If the a value is positive, it opens up. If the a value is negative, it opens down. And your equation now is going to be in factored form, meaning that it's going to have those parentheses. Okay? And I want you to take a good look at that equation, the way it's supposed to be. So it's going to be y equals a. And that a is always going to be outside of those parentheses, and then the two parentheses are going to be what is already factored. Okay, so when I take a look at this equation, there are my factors, the parentheses, what's out here in front. If there's nothing there, there is a positive 1 understood to be there. Okay, and if that's the case, this is going to open up. Now, the solutions. We're still going to be talking about solutions. It's x-intercepts. They're also going to call it zeros. They're also going to call it solutions x-intercept. That's about it. Okay, so how do we find those solutions? Well, we're going to find those solutions by making those parentheses equal to 0. We want to solve for x. It's always going to look like this, x and then 0, because if the point is on that x-intercept, x-axis, then that y value will always be 0. Okay, so now when they're asking me to do that, I'm going to say this parentheses is equal to 0. That parentheses is equal to 0. And we've done this before. So we're going to subtract 6. X is equal to negative 6. We're going to add 2. X is equal to 2. And we have to make sure that we write it as an ordered pair. So it's negative 6, 0, 2, 0. Okay? The next thing we want to do is we want to find the axis of symmetry, that line that goes through the vertex. Okay, so the axis of symmetry is the middle of the two solutions. And it's fancy dancy here. It's very easy. So we're going to take those x's and we're going to add them together. So negative 6 plus 2, and we're always going to divide by 2. So x is equal to negative 4 over 2. So x is equal to negative 2. And you need to write it like that. We always have to have it x equal to a number. So it's not just showing the work, it's actually writing it correctly. All right, then we're going to talk about vertex. Vertex is that point where the parabola changes from going down to go up, where that switch happens. We need that point. Okay, so the vertex, we're going to substitute the x value from the axis of symmetry and then find the y value. So if my axis of symmetry is a 2, let me find another color for you, is a 2, then we already know that it's going to be negative 2 something. I got to figure out that y value. So you're going to go back to your equation. Y equals x plus 6, x minus 2. And every time that you see an x, you're going to put in that negative 2. And now we're just going to simplify using adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. So negative 2 plus 6 is 4. Negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. And 4 times negative 4 is a negative 16. So my vertex is negative 2, negative 16. So it gets the x from the axis of symmetry, and then I figure out the y. All right, the last thing is the y-intercept. Where does it cross the y-axis? So if that's the case, we're going to substitute 0 for the x, because if I look at those ordered pairs, the x will always be 0. And then we're going to find the value for y. So I already know this much for my equation. I already know that it's going to be 0 some number. I have to find that number. I'm going to go back to my original equation, back to this, and I'm going to put a 0 in every time I see an x. So y equals x plus 6, x minus 2. I'm going to put in a 0. So 0 plus 6, 0 minus 2. So 0 plus 6 is 6. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. So y is equal to negative 12. And that is my y-intercept. That's where it's going to cross the y-axis. Okay? It seems like a lot. Once you start practicing it, it's going to be okay. Okay, let's try an example. So here is the equation. It's already factored. So it's already with parentheses, so it makes it easy for you. Okay? Which way does it open? All right, so I'm going to look out here. What I see there is a positive 1. So now I know it opens up. So I'm expecting it to look like this. Okay, now I need my x-intercepts. My x-intercept, we're going to take those pieces right there and make them equal to 0, just like when we were solving. So we're going to subtract 6. X is equal to negative 3. We're going to add 1. X is equal to 1. So my first point is negative 3, 0. My second point is 1, 0. That means that this U shape is going to cross the x-axis at negative 3 and at positive 1. So now I have those 2 points. So it's going to go through those points and it's going to go up. All right, let's see the rest of it. Then I need to find the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is going to be x equals, and we're going to take these numbers right here and add them and divide by 2. So negative 3 plus 1 is a negative 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 is a negative 1. There's my axis of symmetry. That's how I have to write it. It's an equation. That means that this line right here going through negative 1, it's right smack in the middle between those 2 dots. Okay, that's what we're looking for. And now if I want to find my vertex, now I'm going to take that negative 1 and help me to find the vertex. So I already know that the vertex is going to be negative 1 something. I need to find the y value. So I'm going to go to that equation and put in negative 1 for the x, because I already know that x is negative 1. All right, so negative 1 plus 3 is 2. Negative 1 and a negative 1 is a negative 2. And 2 times a negative 2 is a negative 4. So my vertex is going to be negative 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I know that that's going to go up. That's where it's going to switch. Now I need to find my y-intercept, my last piece. And for my y-intercept, I know that the x value is always going to be 0. So once again, I'm going to take that equation, and everywhere that I see an x, I'm going to put in a 0. So 0 plus 3 is 3. 0 minus 1 is a negative 1. And 3 times a negative 1 is a negative 3. So it's going to cross at 0, negative 3. And now I know that my parabola is going to go this way and shoot up there like that. Okay, let's try another one. All right, which way does it open? Well, I'm going to look way out here in the front, in front of the parentheses. What I have there is a -1. So this is going to open down. And now I need to find those where it's going to cross the x-axis. So I'm going to take those parentheses, x minus 2, make it equal to 0, x plus 2, make it equal to 0. And now I want to leave x by itself. So we're going to add 2. X is equal to 2, which means 2, 0. Subtract 2, x is equal to a -2, which means -2, 0. So now I know that it's going to cross here at -2. It's going to cross there at +2. Okay, now the next thing is my axis of symmetry. For the axis of symmetry, it's x equal, and we're going to take those two numbers that we just found, add them together, and divide by 2. So 2 minus 2 is 0, and 0 divided by 2 is 0. So my axis of symmetry is this line going up and down through 0. That's my axis of symmetry. If I want to find my vertex, I'm going to take that 0 and put it in everywhere that I have an x in my original equation. And again, they switched it on you. They didn't put y anymore. It doesn't make a difference. No, we talked about that last time. So f of x is just like y. Not a difference at all. You have to be careful with this because of this thing right there. All right, we'll see in a minute. So there's my original equation. Now I got to take that and put in a 0. So f of x is equal to a -0 minus 2, 0 plus 2. F of x, -0 minus 2 is -2. 0 plus 2 is 2. Oops, I always have a habit of putting y. There's that negative still outside. -2 times 2 is a -4. And then what that means is that I want the opposite of -4, or there's a -1 there. So -1 times a -4 gives me a +4. So I know that my vertex, the point where it's going to switch, is going to be at 0, 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then finally, I want to find my y-intercept. I know that if it's a y-intercept, the x value has to be 0. And now I'm going to plug it into my equation. So f of x is equal to a -x minus 2, x plus 2. F of x is equal to a -0 minus 2, 0 plus 2. F of x is equal to a -2, +2. -2 times 2 is a -4, and the opposite of -4 is +4. And look at there. It's the same as my vertex. Well, yeah, because isn't the vertex on the y-line? So then it's going to be the same. All right, so now I know that my graph is going to go down this way. Okay? All right, let's try another one. G of x is equal to x plus 3 quantity squared. So let's look at this a little bit carefully. When I say quantity squared like that, that means x plus 3, x plus 3. That's what that means. So it looks just like the previous problems. You're just going to get the same answer in both parentheses. All right, so let's try this. Which way does it open? Well, I'm going to look out there. That's a +1. So it's going to open up. And now I need to find the x-intercept. So we're going to take those parentheses and make them equal to 0. So we'll subtract 3. So it's -3, 0. Subtract 3. x is equal to -3, it's -3, 0. Do you see what I mean? You're just going to get the same answer twice. So -3, 0 is right here. That means that that u is only going to touch the x-axis at one point instead of two. And we saw examples of that when we were looking at the graphs before. And now let's talk about the axis of symmetry. It's going to be x equal, and we're going to take those two numbers, -3 plus -3 divided by 2. Okay, -3 plus -3 is -6 divided by 2. -6 divided by 2 is a -3. There's my axis of symmetry. It's going through -3 right there. That's my axis of symmetry. X is equal to -3. Now they want me to find where's the vertex. Okay, so we're going to take that x value and we're going to put it into the equation to find my y value. So g of x is equal to x plus 3, x plus 3. G of x is equal to -3 plus 3. X again, -3 plus 3. G of x is equal to -3 plus 3 is 0. -3 plus -3 is 0. And 0 times 0 is 0. So that point that we found as the x-intercept is also going to be my vertex. So that is the vertex, and that is the x-intercept. Okay? And now the last thing we have to do is to find the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept is always going to have a 0 for the x value. And once again, we're going to take our equation and we're going to plug in a 0 to see what we get. So g of x is equal to 0 plus 3, 0 plus 3. G of x is equal to 0 plus 3 is 3, 0 plus 3 is 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. So then that is going to cross up here at 0, 9. That is my y-intercept. And now when I go to graph this one really doesn't have a lot of points. I know it's going to do this, and it's going to be the same thing on the other side. And sometimes that happens where that x-intercept is the vertex and it's everything else. That's because it's only touching that x-axis at one point. Okay, now let's take a look at this one. How is this one different? Well, it's not in factored form. But do we already know how to factor? We've been talking about this now for 2 units. We already know how to factor that. So we're going to have to do those same things. Okay, so I know that I'm going to, first of all, see if there's a common denominator. And if it's equal to y, that's the same as having a 0 there. So it is equal to 0. I need a common denominator. And now we have to think a little bit. Okay, when we were factoring, the number in front of the x squared always had to be positive. Okay, is it positive in this one? No, it's negative. So if we need to have those parentheses, I need that number to be positive before anything else. So I can do that if I understand that that's a -1. I can factor out a -1. What that basically does, it changes the sign of all the numbers. So if I factor out a -1, I'm left with a positive x squared. If I factor out a -1, then that's the positive 8x. Factor out the -1, that becomes a positive 15. And now it looks like all the other ones that we have always factored. Look at the parentheses. Do you have a greatest common factor? No. So then we're going to have to copy the a value, copy the c value, and we're going to have to split that middle. And I'm going to have to do this business. A times c That's 1 times 15 is 15, and my b value is 8. So I need two numbers that multiply to 15 and add up to 8. That would be 3 and 5. So plus 3 plus 5. And now we're going to do the greatest common factor. Here is x. I'm left with x plus 3. The greatest common factor here is 5, and it's a positive 5. That sign comes down. I'm left with x plus 3. The parentheses have to be the same, and they are. So I have x plus 3, x plus 5. I have to bring down that negative 1, and now I can bring down my y. So now once I do all of this, I realize that I have two things that I can look at. I have y is equal to a negative x minus 8 minus 15, and y is equal to negative 1, x plus 3, x plus 5. So now I have it in both formats. And I'm going to show you why knowing both formats are going to be important. So now, which way does it open? Okay, if I'm looking for which way it opens, look at it there and look at it there. In both of these, it's negative, so it's going to open down. If I want the x-intercepts, then I'm going to use that second equation. I'm going to take that x plus 3 and make it equal to 0, x plus 5 and make it equal to 0. Subtract 3. Oops, sorry, this one's subtract 5. I'm getting ahead of myself. X is equal to negative 3. X is equal to negative 5. So my x-intercept are negative 3, 0, negative 5, 0. Let's see where those are. Negative 3, 1, 2, 3, negative 5 is right there. So it's going to touch the x-axis twice, okay? And it's going to open down, so it's going to go like this. All right, now my axis is symmetry. Same thing I've been doing. X is going to be equal to those two numbers added together. So negative 3 plus a negative 5, divide that by 2. Negative 3 plus a negative 5 is a negative 8 divided by 2. And negative 8 divided by 2 is a negative 4. So my axis of symmetry is this line going through negative 4. Okay, now we have to deal with the vertex. And the same thing that we've done. I know that the vertex is on that line, so then x has to be negative 4. I just need to find y. And to be honest with you, I would probably plug it in to the bottom equation. I would say y is equal to a negative x plus 3, x plus 5. And that way it's the same thing that we have been doing. Again, be careful with that negative out front. So I have negative 4 plus 3, negative 4 plus 5. Negative 4 plus 3 is a negative 1. Negative 4 plus 5 is a positive 1. And negative 1 times 1 is a negative 1. And what is the opposite of negative 1? It's a positive 1. So now I know that my vertex is negative 4, 1. So my vertex is going to be right there. Okay, now the y-intercept. And this one's the one that you're going to like. All right, I know that the y-intercept, the x value has to be 0. And I know that in the previous problems, we've been taking the equation and we've been plugging it in to the x. Okay, so we can still do it that way. 0 plus 3, 0 plus 5. Well, 0 plus 3 is 3. 0 plus 5 is 5. Yes? And now, neg 5, 3 times 5 is 15. And the opposite of 15 is a negative 15. So that gives me that point of 0, negative 15. But think back to what we learned on the first day. on the first day when they gave us the equation and it was not factored, wasn't this right here my y-intercept? So if it's not factored, you already have your y-intercept right there. You don't have to go through all this business of putting in the 0. I know that my y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 15. So in this case, the y-intercept is off the graph, which sometimes will happen. I think most of the times it will happen. And my graph is going something like that. Okay? Now, what I've forgotten to mention, because I'm kind of in a hurry, I want to get the notes done as quickly as possible for you, is minimum and maximum. Okay, so let's go back and revisit that for this problem. If that is my vertex, is that vertex a minimum or maximum? Is it the highest point or is it the lowest point? It's the highest point, so it's a maximum. All right, let's try another one. Let's take a look at this one. So y equals 2x squared minus 4x. It's not factored. Okay, and that y is the same as 0. Okay, so what do we check for? Greatest common factor first. So if I have 2x squared minus 4x, do I have a greatest common factor? Well, if I look at 2 and I look at 4, my greatest common factor is 2. But always remember, look at your x's. Do you have a greatest common factor for the x's? Yes, you do. I can take out 1x. And when I do that, what am I left with? Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 had 2 x's, I took 1 away, so he still has 1. Negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2, and I took away his x. So now is the pesky little 2 gone? Yes, it is. We have to do nothing else. You don't have to do that x thing, nothing else. The pesky little 2 is gone. So we started off with the equation y equals 2x squared minus 4x. And after we factor it, it's 2x, x minus 2. All right, and now let's go through and answer our questions so we can graph this. Which way does it open? Well, we're going to look at my a value. And my a value is this stuff out in the front. It's positive. And if it's positive, it's going to open up. All right, the x-intercepts. For the x-intercepts, we're going to take this bottom equation that's already factored. And everywhere that you have an x, you're going to make that part equal to 0. So 2x is equal to 0. X minus 2 is equal to 0. I want x by itself, so we're going to divide by 2. X is equal to 0. So that means that that point is 0, 0. Okay, here we're going to add 2. X is equal to 2. That point is 2, 0. So I'm at 0, 0 for an x-intercept and at 2, 0. Those are my x-intercepts. And I know that it's going to open up. All right, now I need the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is x equal, and we're going to take those x values and add them together and then divide by 2. So 0 plus 2 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. There's my axis of symmetry. You have to write it that way. And my axis of symmetry is this line that's going to go through 1. There's my axis of symmetry. X is equal to 1. Now the vertex. For the vertex is on that axis of symmetry, so I know that the x value is going to be that 1. And now I need to figure out what the y value is going to be. You can take either one of the equations. I usually like to take the second one, 2x, x minus 2, and we're going to put in a 1 everywhere that we see an x. So this is 2 times 1, and then 1 minus 2. Well, 2 times 1 is 2. 1 minus 2 is a negative 2. So y is equal to a negative 2. 2 times a negative 1. Okay, so there's my vertex. It is at 1, negative 2. There's my vertex. Now for the y-intercept. Remember what I just said. The y-intercept, we will always be a 0 for the x. I could plug in the 0, like I've been doing with all the other ones, or I can look at that original equation that was not factored and look at the c value. Well, when I take a look at this equation right here, y is equal, and actually I'm going to write it out here just so I can explain it. When I do that and I look at that equation, this is my a value, this is my b value, my c value would be way back here. Is there anything there? No. So then what number is understood to be there? A 0 is understood to be there. So my y value there is another 0. So this point is also my y-intercept. And now my graph is going to go this way and go up. All right, let's take a look at this one. Okay, h of x is equal to negative 3x squared minus 6. It is not factored. I need to factor it so I can find the vertex. And I can find the solutions, the x-intercepts. Okay, so once again, I need a positive in front of the x squared. I don't have a positive there. So I know that whatever I'm factoring out has to be a negative value. Okay, is it going to be a negative 1 or is it going to be another negative number? That depends on the numbers you have there. So you're going to look at 3 and look at 6. What's the greatest common factor for 3 and 6? Well, it is 3. And because that negative is there, I'm going to make it a negative 3. All right, when I take a look, they both have x's, so I can take out an x. And now what am I left with? Well, negative 3 divided by negative 3 is a positive 1, and an x is still there. Negative 6 divided by a negative 3 is a positive 2, and I took away his x. So now my two equations are h of x is equal to a negative 3x squared minus 6x. H of x is equal to a negative 3x, parentheses, x plus 2. Same equation written in two different formats. Okay, which way does it open? All right, so we're going to take a look at those numbers. They are negative, so this is going to open down. Okay, now the x-intercepts. For the x-intercepts, I'm going to go with this equation all the time because it's already factored. It's easier for us. So negative 3x is equal to 0. X plus 2 is equal to 0. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. X is equal to 0 divided by negative 3 is 0. So 0, and the y will always be 0. Okay, here we're going to subtract 2. X is equal to negative 2. So that point is going to be negative 2, 0. So now 0, 0, and negative 2, 0. Those are my x-intercepts. Those are my solutions. Those are my zeros. Now for the axis of symmetry, we're going to take those x values that we just found and add them together and divide by 2. 0 plus a negative 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 divided by a negative 2 is a negative 1. So there's my axis of symmetry. That line is my axis of symmetry. X is equal to negative 1. And I have to write it in that format. Okay? Now we're going to use that x-intercept, or that axis of symmetry, to find my vertex. I already know half of my vertex. I need to find the y value. Okay? So I'm going to take that second equation. H of x is equal to a negative 3x, parentheses, x plus 2. And I'm going to put in a negative 1 everywhere that I see an x. So negative 3 times a negative 1, negative 1 plus 2. H of x, negative 3 times a negative 1 is a positive 3. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1. And now 3 times 1 is 3. So I know that my vertex, the point where it's going to shift, is going to be at negative 1, 1, 2, 3. There's my vertex. So it's going to go down from there. The last thing I have to find is my y-intercept. And my y-intercept will always be 0 followed by a number. I could plug it in, or I can look at my very first equation that was not factored, because I know that if that's my equation, my y-intercept is going to be my c value. Well, there's A, there's B, and C is way out here. Is there a C? No. So then that has to be 0. And that point there is also my y-intercept, because it goes through the y-axis. It goes through that y line. All right, now look at your vertex. Is that vertex a minimum or a maximum? Well, it's at the very top, so then what is it? It is a maximum. And now I can go ahead and graph that. That graph is going to go down like that. All right, I think this is the last one. Yes, good. All right, let's take a look at this one. It's not factored. I need to get it factored. That y is the same as a 0, and I need to get it factored. Greatest common factor first. Do I have a greatest common factor? I look at 2, I look at 8, and I look at 6. I do 2. And the question is now, is it a 2 or a negative 2? Well, it's a positive 2, because there's no negative out in front. So I'm going to leave it as a positive 2. All right, so can I factor out an x? No, because 6 doesn't have an x. So now I'm left with x squared. Negative 8 divided by 2 is a negative 4x. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Okay, pesky little 2 is there, so you have to continue. We have to get it all the way down. So we're going to copy the a value, copy the c value, and we're going to split that middle. All right, and we're going to do this. I'm going to do a times c, so that's 1 times 3 is 3, and my b value is negative 4. Well, factors of 3 are 1 and 3. I need it to be negative 4. Well, if this is positive, my signs are going to be the same. Am I covering that up? So this is plus plus or minus minus. And if I want that to be negative, it has to be minus minus. So it's negative 1, negative 3. And those are the numbers that I'm going to put in front of those x's. And now we're going to group. The greatest common factor there in the front is x. I'm left with x minus 1. The greatest common factor here is a negative 3. I'm left with x minus 1. The parentheses are the same, so it's good. I have x minus 1, x minus 3. We got to bring down the 2 and bring down the y equals. So now my two equations, my original equation was 2x squared minus 8x plus 6. My factored equation is 2, parentheses, x minus 1, x minus 3. So those are the equations I'm working with. All right, which way does it open? All right, no matter which one we look at, which way it opens up. Now I need to find my x-intercepts. I'm going to use the second equation, the one that's already factored. It makes it easy. So x minus 1 is equal to 0. X minus 3 is equal to 0. We're going to add 1. So x is equal to 1. That's 1, 0. In the other one, we're going to add 3. X is equal to 3. So that's 3, 0. Let's put it on the graph. I have 1, 0 and 3, 0. Those two are my x-intercepts, my zeros, my solutions. And now I need to find the axis of symmetry. For the axis of symmetry, we're going to take those values, 1 plus 3, and divide by 2. Well, 1 plus 3 is 4, divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. That's how I have to write it, and it's this line going this way, right in there, that's my axis of symmetry. X is equal to 2. Notice that it's right smack in the middle of those two dots. And now if I want to find my vertex is on that line, so I already know that the x value has to be 0. And I'm going to plug it into either one of the equations. I usually like to go with the second one that's factored, and that way you don't make less tendency to make silly mistakes. X minus 3. Okay, and we're going to put in the number 2, the number 2 everywhere that you have an x. So there's an x, 2. There's another x, another 2. And now we need to simplify. So that parentheses, 2 minus 1 is 1. 2 minus 3 is a negative 1. 1 times a negative 1's a negative 1. And 2 times a negative 1 is a negative 2. So my vertex is at 2, negative 2. There's my vertex. Is that vertex going to be a minimum or a maximum? Well, is it the lowest point or is it the highest point? That U is going to point up. Is it the lowest or the highest? It's my lowest point, so it's going to be a minimum. And now for the y-intercept. That y-intercept, the x value will always be 0. I could plug it in and solve it, but I don't need to do that. I'm going to look at that top equation. And there's my c value right there. That top equation, and I'm going to write it out here again. Let me copy it. 2x squared minus 8x, is it plus 6? I go back to my original equation, the one that's not factored, and this is A, this is B, and that is C. My C value is my y-intercept. So it's 0, positive 6. And at 0, positive 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, my pictures, there's the y-intercept. So now you can go ahead and graph that, and it's going to look like that. Okay? Now, you need to have patience with yourself. So if it's already factored, then you can just find the pieces. If it's not factored, you're going to have to factor it and then find the pieces. Remember that if you have both, the y-intercept becomes really easy, because the c value is your y-intercept.